How's my hair?
Is it just Car Healthcare? Or is it Car Healthcare Realty?
Car healthcare is fine. Car healthcare realty works too. But car healthcare is what we are marketing as now.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Des.
I'm looking for a headphone.
Marshall, you can mute too if you'd like.
Oh, I should have probably broadcasted that from our Facebook page rather than my personal Facebook, but it'll be all right. It's all good. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. So Zoom connects with Facebook.
Yeah, man, it was what I had to do, and I didn't realize how to do this. I had to teach myself. But what you got to do is you got to go into upgrade your account, and you've got to have webinar included.
Mm.
And with webinar
On Zoom,
yeah. And with webinar, there's some additional functionality. And one of the features that it includes is the ability to broadcast live through Facebook. So you still record it, you can still broadcast it. Because I've tried to do this before and it kind of didn't go off well, and I couldn't figure out why. And
yeah,
I did a little research, and that was the solution. It's like, heck yeah, man, we're about to rock and roll with this thing.
All right. Well, I'm ready when you are.
All right. Well, we're running, man. So I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat. On the chat box here too, so we can field any incoming questions. And
awesome.
Apparently, Mike, your hair looks great. So good job. You haven't been staying away from the hairstylist while we're on the shutdown?
They keep cutting it too short.
Yeah, I got a little disappointed with my mother this morning. She called me this morning and asked me if I was okay, and I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And it's like, I'm more worried about you and Dad, because they're a little bit up there in age.
Yeah.
My father's a diabetic, and I was like,
oh man,
he's one of those people that he's real stubborn, and he's going to keep running out and going to work, doing what he does. And she told me that she had a hair appointment later today, and I was like, why? Yeah, but she's like, well, she said she closes at 6, and and I'm sure she's probably short on money because they're closing. I'm like, I don't care if she's short on money.
Yeah,
you're in the high risk category. That's the last place you need to be going.
So they're still open in Tennessee. You can still, yeah.
They're open until 6 o'clock today. We just got the order from the mayor. We just got the order from the mayor yesterday, so everybody closes today at 6 o'clock, and there's like a 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew.
Wow.
So,
is that Nashville? You said the mayor?
Tullahoma. No, the mayor shut Nashville down like last week.
That's what I thought. A lot of places we see are shut down.
Yeah, I'm in a little podunk town. We're in the armpit of Tennessee down here.
Love it.
Yeah. So good. Well, man, I'll do a quick introduction for the folks that don't know Mike Jorgensen. He is are you over the Southeast, or how important are you with car?
Mildly important. Depends on who you ask. But I am, so obviously was in Alabama managing the team here for the last 4 years, and then stepped into this new role as a regional director now for about the last month and a half. And so actually we're going to be moving up to Tennessee in the next few months.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Given as long as everything stays the same, we're building a house right now in Mount Juliet. So yeah, it helps with the airports.
That's a nice little area to be over. There's a good gym there too. I think it's called Fitness 1440.
Okay.
I think that down. Juliet. I went to if you go on Google, man, they've done a good job branding themselves and making them, virtually available online. So you'll be able to find them. But they've got a good little thing going on there. They do a lot of NPC workshops for fitness folks, for like bodybuilders and bikini competition workshops and that kind of stuff. So they're really plugged in to the fitness community. Got some good.
I don't do a lot of bikini stuff, but maybe I could get into that.
Hey, you could, man. You could. I had there's a girl that I coach. She's got a competition coming up that got pushed out because of this thing, and she took a picture. I trained her the other day. We did legs, and she took a picture and posted on her Instagram and voted, getting all these people to vote on who had the better legs. Dude, I got beat by a landslide.
You got beat? Wasn't even close.
It's like 90. It's like 92 to 8, like 92% to 8%.
Wow.
I was like, man, that's awful.
That's rough, man.
I was like, I think you might be a little biased because those are all your Facebook people. You're
right. Yeah. You post it and see who wins.
Exactly. That's what I should do. See, let's take the bias out of the equation. Let's see what the stats really are.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate you having me. These are cool. I love that you're doing this for your docs. Been following some of that stuff you're doing, and it's cool to see how you're encouraging in this time, because I think there's so much going on and so much fear. And so I love that you're getting your docs good information, and appreciate you having me.
Sure, man. Everybody's handling it a little differently, some people handling it better than others. I'm grateful and blessed. Most of my folks are pretty calm. There's not a lot of, just really good leadership, man. Because it's times like this when leadership's most important, because this is a time of uncertainty, and that's what makes people comfortable. And that's what good leaders do, is they give people certainty.
Exactly.
I think if nothing else, obviously my travel schedules, kneel, for the next couple of weeks. And so, with that free time, if nothing else, I want to get as much of this stuff. Mm-hmm. I just scheduled something with Lee Pennington's a CPA I work with out of Atlanta.
He's great. Yeah.
But if nothing else, we can get just an abundance of online CE. The Hinman, canceled. So counting on that. So I think, and I see a lot of other folks doing the same thing, so they're taking the opportunity, if people having a couple of weeks of not a lot to do, let's just get an abundance of CE out there, learning opportunities, and let's take this opportunity to work on ourselves and our businesses,
Yeah. So what are you seeing? Are a lot of your offices, are all of them closed right now? Or I know it's elective procedures. I know I saw your post saying like, what is an elective procedure? Yeah. What are you seeing? What are your clients doing?
And for the most part, they're either closed completely, or they are closed with the exception of like urgent care, urgent procedures. And the intention behind that is that, if dental practices are open to see emergencies, then statistically 15% of the visits they go into the emergency room are dental related emergencies.
Wow.
And so what we're doing on a national level is we're creating a platform whereby we can connect the hospitals to, dentists, and our clients who are open to see emergency care. So when somebody comes in and they present with dental pain, then we can immediately refer them out of there, free up the emergency room. And not,
that's great.
Yeah. Not create an additional challenge there. And then I had an interesting conversation with a client last night, and I think this is a debate that a lot of dentists are having amongst themselves right now, rightfully so too, because I can't find the logic, to kind of steer them the opposite direction. And I try to be a pretty logical guy. And that is, if the intention to shut down dental practices is, to free up PPE and to keep the traffic into the emergency room at a minimum, and to reduce or promote the whole social distancing and not a lot of large groups and interaction. If a patient comes in with like an abscess, right? If we only do what is considered and defined by the ADA as essential care, then you just basically get the patient out of pain, give them some meds, and send them on their way.
Right.
You
not
don't
fixing anything.
Do a root canal,
it's a Band-Aid.
Crown, right? You don't do a root canal and a crown and then a filling on the adjacent tooth, right? But the challenge is where does that interfere with what the objective is?
Right.
The patient's already in the chair.
Yeah.
Right? They're the only ones there. So we're not interacting with anybody. We've already kept them out of the emergency room. So we crossed off objective number 2. And we're not going to use any more PPE doing the additional stuff that we would have done just doing the emergency. We would actually
Right.
got more out of the PPE.
Right.
Plan. And so
Yep.
I know this is bouncing around a lot of people's heads, and I know that some people would call it a gray area. Some people would say, no, that's black and white. I don't know the answer, so
Right.
I'd say that's floating around a lot of people's minds,
Yeah, and it's tough because they have obviously an important role in the community. And so how are they just going to the office when there's an emergency visit? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, some are they've got staff. Well, I'll tell you a variety of different things. Some have a skeleton crew. They've got like an assistant who is on the clock all day long. They're bouncing between the operatory and the front desk. When there's not an emergency patient, they're filing insurance claims and calling patients to check in on them.
Right.
When they do have a patient, then they're seeing the patient with the doctor and then checking the patient out. Some are on call. They've got doctor's got their cell phone number. Patient calls for an emergency. They call the assistant. People go in and they see the patient, send the patient home. So I think there's enough to do in a dental practice right now where you could justify and legitimately financially support, without creating any kind of complications, having a couple of people in the practice
Right.
during normal working hours. A, to make sure phone calls are fielded. We're fielding all the phone calls. B, I think this is a great time to connect with all of your patients, just not to collect money, not to, reactivate them into hygiene, but just call and check in on them and just say, hey, how you doing? We're thinking about you. We care about you. Call us if you need anything. It's a great time to follow up on outstanding insurance claims. It's a great time to do chart auditing. Man, we could go through all the charts. We could identify all the patients that are candidates for implants and create a list that we could potentially, target when we do an implant campaign. I'm doing an event next Friday on getting more implant cases, right? And so that's a component of it. I mean, we can identify all the patients on our patient base who were in partials, dentures, bridges, missing teeth, right? I think it's statistically 45% of a general practice's patient base is candidate for implants.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a huge opportunity. You can
No kidding.
All the patients you don't have full contact information, all the patients who are candidates for ortho, you can clean up outstanding treatment plans, old treatment. There's a ton of stuff that can be done. That is important stuff that needs to be done that slows us down during normal working hours, but we never have time to work on it.
Right.
Now we have a lot of time to work on it.
Yep.
So,
well, yeah, that's what we're seeing, man. We're seeing a lot of it, and it honestly varies by market. I saw Doug Price was on the call. He was telling me that some of his vendors are busier than they've ever been. We've also seen where offices are. I've talked to other vendors who say my phone hasn't rang in a week, and so we see it. I've heard of even some offices buying a lot of supplies because they're concerned about the supply and demand chain. Like how's this gonna affect us in the future?
Yeah.
What's that?
Hoarding supplies?
Exactly. Yeah. So,
man.
but I also see the opposite where they're not.
Yeah.
They completely cut off supplies. So
Yeah.
it just varies so much office by office. And
Yeah.
that's why I think this topic of how do I optimize everything? It's a great time right now for doctors to be looking at their entire practice and saying, what are these expenses and how can I better manage them? And I think one of those obviously being the real estate. So it's hard to, I mean, they can't do a Zoom conference to do a root canal. So they're at home right now, or a lot of them are, except for those emergency cases. And this provides a great opportunity again to get through to some of the stuff that, like you were just saying, auditing some of the charts and looking at your expenses. So this is something that's kind of hitting a nerve right now with a lot of these doctors.
Yeah. That's another thing, man. We're doing corporate calls as with our corporate leadership team, with as much information is being created and is discovered and then it's getting filtered down. We're connected with our corporate leadership team pretty frequently just to make sure that we've got the information that we need. And there is a couple of things. A lot of people are talking about these teledentistry codes. I don't know what they are. It's like 99.95 and 99.96. One of them doesn't apply because it actually requires the patient to be it could, if the patient's physically in the practice and you're on the phone with the specialist. trying to determine
Right.
course of action is appropriate, then there's a code that applies to that that's billable through insurance. And there's a second code. It's the subsequent code. I think it's 9996 that pertains to if you're talking with your patient over the phone. And there is a device, I can't remember the name of it. We just talked about it yesterday, but there's a device that you can send home with your patient or ship to your patient. They have it, they use it, and it transmits data. It has something to do with their thing that goes on their toothbrush or something like that. And it transmits data to the dental practice. And so your hygienist can basically be in the practice receiving this data, interpreting this data, and then making a phone call to the patient to provide recommendations on, hey, you're missing the back of these molars. You know what I'm saying? And
that is fascinating.
Really interesting. And that's a billable insurance code. And one of the questions that came up, and I don't know I don't have an NDAS report. Well, I could probably pull one from behind me back here, but
yeah.
One of the questions was that I've had come up is somebody had heard that dental insurance companies they're putting a pause on claims. Like we're not reimbursing claims. It's completely false. I got confirmation from that from two very high up sources in the insurance community, in the dental insurance industry, and in the dental industry to confirm that no, dental insurances they're actually expediting the process of paying claims.
Right.
And that will continue to be the case. So, if we did the math on this thing, and I don't know how many candidates, what percentage of patients would be legitimate candidates for this service, but we did the math on this thing, and you could have a hygienist just using these teledentistry codes that could roughly produce the same amount on a daily basis that she would typically produce on a normal day. Because if
that's crazy.
Yeah, you say it's a 5-minute phone call and it's a $25. You see what I'm saying? It's a 20, or let's say it's a $20, reimbursement from insurance. Then how many times is 5 minutes going to 60 minutes?
I should know that. 20? No, that's not right.
No, like 9 times.
5, 10, 12 times.
That was easy.
Look at that, man.
I don't know why that was
We're so good. All these people are like, come on, man. Who are we?
So it goes in 12 times. So 12 times $20, there's $240 an hour.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
That's, that's crazy.
So we've got some of that information coming down that we can share with our folks. So yeah, man, we're people are going to be flexible. They're going to be, creative, and we're going to discover things and learn things that have been there the whole time that we never knew were there,
right,
that we could be taken advantage of. And so I think we're going to be even stronger when we come out of this thing, because people are digging in so deep now, trying to figure. They're kind of, some people are like in desperation mode a little bit. It's like, I need to know what to do, what I can do, what the options are. And because of we're educating ourselves so much right now, I think we're going to be a lot stronger and a lot better off when we come out of this thing.
I agree, man. And that's where there are two ways to make more money. One is to produce more, which some of these ideas like you're talking about, that helps production and something that they may not otherwise have looked into, because now they have the time. And so how do I increase production and income in that regard? Another way, though, is to look at what I'm spending and how do I make sure that I'm not overpaying. I hear all the time from vendors saying, they're getting pushed back on their percentage, like this box of gloves, can we reduce it by 10%? And that's an area where a lot of doctors are focusing. And so when you're coming in the door, when a vendor's coming in the door, they're saying, how do I increase my profitability? I'm going to push here. But then there are some major expenses, such as the real estate, second highest expense in most practices, where a lot of times they don't know what to do in that regard. And so I actually heard it on the phone the other day. It kind of blew my mind. A doctor was renewing a lease, and I said, hey, I think we can get $15,000 to $20,000 worth of free rent here. It's a client that we work with who has multiple locations. And they said, man, I don't know if I want to upset the cart here. So, we'll just keep moving on. And I don't think we need to push on that one. Let's go look at this other. And it kind of blew my mind when they're talking about $15,000 to $20,000 savings. How much, how hard do you have to push on your rep for supplies to make up that type of money. And so, and this is, again, it's a net savings to the doctor. So that $15,000, you don't have to produce another dollar to save that amount of money. And so there are a lot of times in general when practices can be saving on their real estate, but now is a time where you can look into some of these expenses and see how do we optimize this, make sure that your loans are in check. And so we'll hit on a couple of those, I think, but the biggest thing right now is you've got time, and absolutely we need to look at how we can produce more, but let's also look at some of the expenses, such as the real estate, such as some of the loans, because what has happened with this across the country, obviously there's a shortage of production, not just in dentistry, but everywhere. And the government is stepping in to the tune of, I heard, almost $2 trillion the other day to help stimulate some of this stuff again. So that money hopefully is going to be coming back. But while we have a minute, let's look at what our expenses look like and how we can affect them.
Yeah. I think more, I don't say this being critical or judgmental, but I think more people need to take a look at the opportunistic side of this equation. Because if
100%,
if you look in the Japanese alphabet, the I don't know what they call it, the symbol that
yep,
represents challenge is the same symbol that represents opportunity.
Yep.
So with every time of adversity, there's significant opportunity built into the DNA of that,
yep,
of that challenge. And so I think a lot of people are missing the opportunistic side of the equation. That's one of the things that we're focusing on with a lot of our offices is and we talked about this on our leadership call yesterday, we want to make sure that we've got our defensive strategy in place to protect us from the things that we can protect us from and mitigate the losses, right? But B,
yep,
we also want to make sure we've got an offensive game plan so that the opportunities that are available right now, we're capitalizing on them.
100%.
For example, there is probably no better time in history to refinance your mortgage than right now.
Yep.
Probably no better time to refinance a car payment.
Yep.
Student loans have been deferred out 90 days, 60 or 90 days. Bank of America, I saw that they're deferring, loans out 90 days. Patterson is deferring equipment loans out 90 days. You've got the SBA disaster relief program that's in place where you can get some very low cost revenue, and you may not even you may not even need the revenue. That's a lot of my clients came back and said, I'll do that if I need to do it.
Right.
Need to do it because that's almost interest-free money that you can take. If you're paying 1.5 on this loan for $50,000, take that and put it in something that's growing at 2.5.
Yep.
Now you're saving
100%.
You're making a point,
Yep.
Lines of credit. If we run the risk of a lot of the banks and institutions shifting their capital over, to provide lending, which is what they're being encouraged to do from the Fed, then if you've got a line of credit available, go ahead and take that line of credit, put it in your checking account. So you've got that liquid capital available. If you don't need it after this thing's said and done, just put it right back and everybody wins. If you do need it, it's there and there's no chance that it's going to get frozen and you're not going to have access to it.
Yep.
So
man, that's where we see a lot of honestly fear, and it's not within the dental community alone, it's across the country. People are hearing what's on the news, and I mean we're stuck at home a lot of times, and so we have it on constantly, and all we're hearing is the media makes money on bad news, and so we're hearing a lot of this bad news, and it can create the cycle of concern. And so just reminding in the dental community specifically, reminding them that they have the best, they have one of the lowest default rates. I think it's number 2 only to vet, lowest default rates around. And so not letting that fear sink in, because they spent a lot of money to get that degree. That degree provides a lot of security for these guys. And so just reminding them of the fact that you have that, don't let this fear sink in, because it is, I mean, there's a lot to listen to that can make you concerned today. But in the healthcare community specifically, and more so even in the dental community, there's a great chance right now to take advantage of all of these things that are being done to help all of the other businesses, because a lot of businesses are going to close their doors for good through this time. Most dental offices should not be concerned about that at this point, because there are there are so many things being done to help them. But number two, they have such a great default rate. One of the concerns that they need to be considering more so than is this going to affect me in the long run is how do I schedule patients for after this? Because you're going to have an influx of all of the cases that or all of the patients that you couldn't see for the last 2 weeks. Now we've got to consider what all this future is. And so I think a lot of it is, if I can give an example about it, we got a puppy on Saturday, and it's the cutest dog I've ever seen. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Her name's Penny. She's
What kind of
adorable.
dog is it?
It's a miniature Aussie.
Oh, I got you.
So we have a 5, a 4, and a 2-year-old as well. And when she came in, she was really excited about, or all the kids were really excited about the dog. But then she started like getting playful, and it scared them. I mean, she's literally maybe this big.
Yeah.
And my kids are terrified of her. And so they're a lot of times when she's on the ground and she starts coming towards them, they get scared because they think that she's going to hurt them. And so they run away. And so she chases them. She thinks they're playing, or she thinks they're scared or whatever. But in their mind, the fact that she's chasing them now is kind of confirming their fear. Like she's trying to get me. And so it's this idea of, she's not trying to hurt them. She's not trying to bite them. She's trying to love them. She's trying to protect them and make sure that they're that they're safe. Like, why are you crying? Why are you running? Let me help you.
Yeah.
But in their mind, because they're seeing it through a filter of, I know that she's trying to hurt me.
Fear.
Now they don't understand what's happening because the filter is off.
Yeah.
And so if they could just understand, my 4-year-old, my first daughter, is starting to understand it now. And so she'll sit down on the ground and hold it back and pet her. And that's, I think, a lot of times what we need to do in situations like this is stop, look it in the eye, see what's actually happening, not through all the fear of what's
Right.
in front of us right now. Because if you look for it, there are plenty of things to be scared about.
Oh, sure.
It's a confirmation bias of, if I want to be fearful right now, there's a lot of stuff I can look at to be fearful.
Yeah.
But if you stop and assess the situation, and get on your knees and hold her back and pet her, or look at what's happening right now and all of the things that can help benefit the practice, I think it provides, like you said, a lot of opportunity. And so I hope that a lot of these doctors can consider, how do I, through this situation, through everything that's happening, I have a low default rate, I'm going to get through this, but how do I now take advantage of this to the tune of some of the things that you said? If we can work on right now what is in front of us or what we have already and optimize everything here, then moving forward, like you said as well, we're going to be even stronger because of it.
Yeah. I have a couple of opinions there. One is, I totally get what you're saying. You get what you focus on. So if you're focusing on
Exactly,
all the negative stuff that you're seeing in the Facebook groups, if you're focusing on the media, and people trying to spin this, the media is going to manipulate the information to fit its narrative. Right. And if the intention is to, well, I don't want to get into that because I open myself up a lot of attack.
Yeah.
I get into that. But regardless of what the intention is, that if you watch the news for 30 minutes, you're going to walk away from that feeling like we're doomed. Right. Yep. If you go in and spend an hour in a lot of these Facebook groups, man, there's a lot of positive stuff. There's a lot of positive people out there, man. And I'm grateful for that there are a lot of people out there that are operating from a fear or a faith-based mentality rather than a fear mentality. But, I think that's extremely important. Important. And one of the things I see, and this is not a criticism or anything like that, but I was even talking to my mom about, she's an executive assistant with us, and she was talking about, gave me an example of somebody else. Well, they're just, they're saying that the place should be closed and that we should be at home and we should be getting our full pay and all this kind of stuff. And man, we got to take a step back and look at this thing logically, because if some practices out there are fortunate enough to be in the position to where they've got financial reserves and they can do things that perhaps other practices can't.
Right.
So it's not really apples to apples, because you talk to this hygienist a mile down the road and she's getting paid by her doctor her full pay for the next 2 weeks, and you're not. That doesn't mean your doctor's bad. And it doesn't mean that doctor's a better guy than he is. It just means their businesses are in very different financial positions.
Right.
Maybe good decisions or bad decisions put him in those positions, but that's the reality. It's not that he cares less about his people than
Right.
that doctor cares about his. I can guarantee you he cares. It's breaking his heart when he puts his head on a pillow at night because he's not able to do the things that some of his peers are able to do.
Right.
And I think it's important for the employees to take a step back and remember, if the doctor was to do that, and let's say he doesn't have the financial resources to really do that, but he wants to do that anyway, that could potentially bankrupt that business.
Right.
If
the job might not be there.
Yeah, we don't know how long this thing's going to last. So if I run through all of my financial reserves over the next 2 weeks because I'm, providing this benefit, and that's what it is. It's a benefit.
Right.
Because technically we are out of work. That's called unemployment.
Right.
And so if I'm providing this benefit over the next 2 weeks and that eliminates my financial reserves, and it turns out this thing lasts longer than 2 weeks, and I need that capital to help sustain the business, then these people, although they got paid for the first 2 weeks, are going to be finding a job when it's time to go back to work.
Right.
And all those patients are going to have to find another practice to go to because that
Right.
was no longer sustainable. Media Dent, for example, closed its doors.
Wow.
Right? And so, I mean, that's a real thing. So your doctor's job as the CEO is to make decisions that are in the best interest of the practice, the team, and the patients.
Right.
Got to meet all three of those criteria. Right. If it doesn't meet all three of those criteria, that's not a good decision. So you can't bankrupt the practice to make sure that the employees' bills are paid.
Right.
That's why we have government assistance programs and some of those kinds of things. So it's difficult. Not all decisions are popular decisions. Not all decisions make you feel good when you make them at the end. So I think we got to give these guys. I think we got to give these guys a little bit of a break, man, because they're doing the best they can with the resources they have available to them. It's a scary time for everybody. They're probably more scared than anybody because they've got more on the line. Private loans and real estate and equipment loans. And so it's tough as the business, and from a business owner's perspective, man, this is a lot more stressful I'm a lot more stressed as a business owner than I am as a homeowner.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
100%. 100%.
And
I love that about you guys. I love that the docs have somebody. I love that, number one, that you call him a CEO, because I think a lot of times these doctors think clinically or medically first and foremost, but a lot of them don't get some of the training that they need to be a CEO, because they are like a dental clinic is they run that clinic. They don't have a lot of times practice managers like some of these larger medical groups or others to help through all of that. And so they're wearing a lot of different hats.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just how do I seat this crown, it's how do I handle Nancy and Tina who are having a tiff, or how do I handle the collections are down a little bit. And so I love that you guys have the ability to step in and help them see it from not just a clinical perspective, because it's not just a clinic. If you're a private practice owner, you are a CEO. And so I love that you guys have that ability to step in, because sometimes those decisions are not popular ones, like you said. And so having somebody to say, hey, I know this is hard, but here are some other things you can do to help them, because again, you may not have the ability to defer some of the stuff like they can with their mortgage or other situations. And so helping them even understand some of that stuff is I love that they have a coach that they can lean on to help them through these hard decisions, because most of them don't. If they don't have one, there is no really other ability to see the light, and just living in that fear and concern. And so I agree, man. That's great. They have to step back a little bit and know that they're not bad guys for doing some of these things, because they don't really, otherwise they can't, like you said, there's no, you're not being nice by giving them the money now if in the future they don't have a job. Now they're out of a job for the long run. So I like that you made that distinction, because it's true.
And I do, man. My heart goes out to everybody that's in a tough financial spot right now. I know people are out of work. I know people are wondering how they're going to pay their mortgages. People are worried about how they're going to make their car payments. And for the most part, so they need to be looking into loan deferment. They need to be looking into refinancing. They need to be looking into small business disaster relief. programs, and lines of credit. But I know it's a tough time, man. I think it's important that as we're struggling with that, the hard, what am I going to do? And we're, just surrounded by information that's telling us we should be scared. We got to flip that script a little bit and just make sure that we're looking through the right lens.
Yep.
Otherwise we could potentially damage the relationships in the process, or make some very ineffective decisions, that are going to basically translate into unwanted outcomes when this thing all plays through.
Yep.
And what
100%.
what you said earlier, I totally agree. I have an opinion and a belief that, for every piece of information out there that says that we're doomed right now, there's a piece of information that says that this is a fantastic opportunity to create
Exactly.
a bigger, better, stronger business, economy, et cetera, healthcare system, everything. And so it really depends on which piece of information you're looking for.
Yep.
If you're looking for this information, go to the news, go to Facebook, you're going to find plenty of it. If you're looking for this, there's a lot of that out there too.
Yep.
So
it's the confirmation bias. You will find what you look for. It's just a fact. And our brains are wired that way. We want to be right. And so we're looking for the stuff that validates what we want to see. And so that's what I wanted to hit that first, especially because the real estate market is a little bit different right now. And so, but if you're looking at it from the wrong perspective, you're going to miss a lot of opportunity. So what we're seeing right now in the real estate market is for the last 3 or 4 years, it's been a seller's market. Market has been very high. And so what that means is now that the market is volatile, it's not that the sellers are getting better. The volatility means that it's actually kind of evening out or even becoming more of a buyer's market. Mm-hmm. And so it provides a great opportunity for the practices that are well financed and have the ability to weather some of this better than others. It provides a great opportunity for ownership potential, or and for a lot of doctors who are leasing, it provides a great opportunity to make sure that they are in the best situation with their lease. And so at the very least, what they can be doing right now is looking at what are my options? What does the market look like? And assessing those options. Now is a great time to be doing that. And so I'm not saying that everybody's got to go buy buildings, buy real estate. That's not at all what I'm saying. But knowing what the opportunity is important, because that's where a lot of doctors go wrong, I think, with their real estate. Is they find one building and say, I want that one, and they go negotiate on that one. You have no leverage to make sure that you're getting a good deal. You have no idea if it is a good deal. You don't have market to consider. And that's where having a game plan with the real estate and understanding what the market actually looks like, that's why having somebody help through the process is so important. Mm-hmm. And so I'll hit on a couple things real quick that doctors can look at in the current situation. We've already touched on a number of them in terms of, if you own real estate, make sure that your loan is in a good spot, because like you said, it's a great time to be refinancing. So if you own real estate, look at the loan, make sure that you are in that good spot. If you're currently leasing,
what would you consider a good spot right now?
That's tough. It depends. It's bank by bank, but if you are above 4 or 4.5, I would definitely be at least looking at it, talking to a banker who understands what the real estate, or not even real estate. There are a lot of banks who understand dental really well. You mentioned Bank of America before. They're not changing anything right now. Some banks right now are actually pulling back and getting a little bit more restrictive. Mm-hmm. Having a bank that understands the dental community and what's happening is important, because they're not going to change what's going on right now. There are a number of banks that are larger and not as concerned about what's happening right now. And then there are some smaller banks as well that have the ability to be a little bit more flexible. And so, but 5 or 6 years ago, you might have been paying in the 5s or 6s or even 7s mm-hmm. on your real estate. If you have an SBA loan sitting out there, I would absolutely be looking at that right now to be reconsidering it. And so, but to answer your question in terms of what's a good rate, I've seen, before all of this started happening, we saw a bank come out with 2.8% financing. You can get, I imagine with some of the stuff that's happening, it may even be getting a little bit better. And I think there might be a misconception with some doctors hearing that the Feds dropped rates to 0, thinking that I'm going to get a 0% loan. That's not the case. You're not getting 0%. But the numbers are definitely better than they have been in a while. So that's one area where they can be looking. On the lease side, we get a lot of questions. This is probably one of the bigger questions that we get is doctors saying, what can I do with my lease? You brought it up with doctors and their staff. It's very similar with landlords and their doctors. So landlords can't necessarily just say you don't have to pay rent for 6 months or however long. They've got to have a way to recapitalize on that. And so we've seen sometimes where if you reach out to your landlord and say, hey, can you defer, or can you abate the rent? So basically we add it on to the back. Sometimes they'll do that, but it's important to understand that they are going through this as well. And their market is being rocked more so than yours as a dentist. And so sometimes landlords can't do that. Sometimes there are clauses within a lease. If you're going through a really tough time, it might be worth it to reach out to a real estate attorney to see if some of the clauses within the lease would allow for. There's one thing called force majeure, which is in some leases, not all of them. If you had a good attorney, good real estate attorney, look over your lease on the front end. Sometimes they'll put that stuff in there. Force majeure is basically if there's something that's making it to where I can't pay my rent, then the rent doesn't have to necessarily be paid. But there's a lot of question. I've heard both sides of the argument saying it's a virus, it's an act of God, that does not apply to this. But on the other side, the government is doing some things right now to restrict the ability. And so we can't, that's actually not an area where we can help as brokers, but that is an area where having an attorney look it over could be a great potential as well.
Yeah. And in the event that your lease or your mortgage doesn't allow for a deferment or whatever on your lease payment or your mortgage payment, you can look into your overhead insurance to see if you've got like interruption of business.
Business. Yep.
And that could potentially subsidize you to pay, what the financial obligations are until, you're able to generate the revenue again.
Yep. That's great. And that's important. A lot of doctors aren't, when times are great, they're not considering that type of insurance sometimes. And so again, like you said, hopefully at the end of this, we're going to be better because of it. Yeah. And so that's an area where doctors should have some type of insurance or coverage there. Yeah. But business interruption is definitely one where they can, if they've got that, now is the time to use it.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point, man. And this is really one of the big responsibilities that we have as coaches working with dental practices across the country, and that is, our clients are CEOs of their own business, and there's a lot of decisions that they have to make, and there's a lot of responsibility that falls on their plate. There's a lot of moving parts within their business. And so we want to make sure that they've got a board of directors, right? So you've got the CEO, the owner, operator, dentist, CEO who's pulling the strings and making the decisions, but we want to make sure that they've got a board of directors full of specialists in different areas of the industry and of their business. For example, a practice broker is a good person to have in your pocket, a coach, an attorney, a CPA, a dental supply rep, a very good dental supply rep, an equipment rep, real estate brokers. Those are great people. Those are great people to be connected to and have in your, on your team, right?
Yep. So your board of directors.
And it also depends on what moves you're making. We've got some doctors who are building, small, medium, and moderately sized DSOs. We've got doctors who were just kind of playing in that 3 to 5 practice space, doctors who are building big group practices, doctors that just want 1 doctor, 2 hygienists, 2 assistants. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So depending on what your business model is and what your business plan is, that's one thing that we're focusing on a lot over the next 2, or I am with my clients, is developing a business plan. But depending on what your business plan is, I think having your team, a more comprehensive team, is very important, because we can, and a lot of them, they expect us to a lot of them will expect us to have all the answers. And I wish I was that smart, man. I really do.
But you're a pretty smart guy, but yeah.
The fact of the matter is, man, I'm not, and I try to educate myself by, hanging out with guys like you and other professionals in the industry that know what I don't know, so I can at least know enough to help my client see the value in adding this person to the team. Right.
And that's where this honestly kind of probably highlights the importance of your lease or your mortgage, because in times like this, and again, this is a little bit different even, but when the economy gets a little bit tighter, sometimes that the number one expense is obviously payroll. And some of them right now are eliminating some of those expenses, whether by laying off or by saying, hey, I need you to hold off on some of those or the next couple paychecks. But with the real estate, a lot of times landlords aren't able to or willing to just let you not pay rent. And so that's an expense that you've got to make sure is in check, because that expense doesn't often change. But the point is, every 5 to 7 years, or even 10 on some leases, that's a great time. It's a completely negotiable expense, and making sure that you're in the best position with that is important.
Mhm.
And so anybody that's leasing, there is an opportunity at the end of that. It's an option. A lot of times the doctors think the option is on the landlord, but it's actually not. The landlord has to take that deal. The option is for the tenant. So you don't actually have to take that deal. You should be, at the end of every lease, be looking at the market and considering what else is out there to make sure that you're getting a fair rate. And so a lease renewal is actually the number one transaction type out there. And a lot of doctors are not taking advantage of that time within their lease, because that is, again, we've seen 6-figure savings oftentimes with dental offices on lease renewals, because we saw one instance where somebody signed a lease in 2008. It was a 10-year lease, and it had 3% per year escalations. And in that time, obviously the market tanked, and it corrected and got back up, but she was 25% over market, and she was paying $30 per square foot, and they were advertising a space next door for 20. And so we were able to reduce that rate back down, and it was $160,000 savings. And that was just in rate reduction. So that's an immediate, I think it was $1,600 a month. That was a net savings to that doctor, that now she can go get more equipment. She can go, or even just, it's a savings to her where she just gave herself a raise. And so that's where we see a lot of times doctors they're not informed in terms of understanding that the lease renewal or the option is only an option for them. They don't have to take that option. And it's imperative that you have somebody look it over. Another area where doctors don't understand is sometimes the dates within a lease. So sometimes there's even a lease renewal notification period where if you miss that date, you're not looking at the expiration date, you're looking at the renewal notification period. If you miss that date, the option can sometimes fall off the table. So we had one in Auburn, doctor in a strip center, end cap space, and the landlord just spent $1 million to get a junior anchor tenant into that property. And so that's a big capital expense that they were looking to capitalize on with the tenants that are currently in there. And so Doc had been there for 20 years, and he was paying $15 a foot. He had an option at $17 a foot, but everybody else in the center was paying 24, and he had the best spot in that center. And so he reached out to us and said, hey, can you help? I don't want to pay $17.50, but he missed that renewal notification window. And the landlord said, I don't want you in here. You can get out because your rent is the cheapest and you have the best spot in the center. And so we were able to help keep him there. Rent the landlord, if they didn't get that rent, then they weren't going to do a deal. They wanted him to get out of there since he missed that option period. The best case for him actually would have been to stay in that center at that $17.50 rate. But since he missed that window, he didn't have that option. And so it's important to have somebody who's tracking those leases. There to have somebody know what those dates are, not just what the expiration date is, but is there a notification window there, or what are some of the other implications with holdover or anything else like that. It's important to have somebody understand that. And most doctors, they may know when the expiration is, but most doctors don't actually know what the specific dates and deadlines within the lease that they need to be considering. They don't know what most of those are.
Right.
How
does the relationship with you work the best? Is it, I've got an ongoing relationship with this guy. He's staying on top of the lease. If there's anything I need to know, he's going to call me and let me know. Is there a time frame where my lease is coming up in 2 years? I need to make sure I call Mike by, 24 months out, 12 months out. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have, I would say the best situation, if somebody's in a lease, would be to get somebody to track that lease for them. So having somebody look at the lease, see where you are versus market. So a lot of times we can tell, even in that moment, this is actually a pretty good deal, or this needs a lot of work. So having somebody track the dates is important. It's not really an ongoing conversation. They can reach out to us at any point. We get a lot of clients who we've already transacted on, and they're calling us right now to say, hey, what do I need to be doing here? And that they're always welcome to be calling us. But when we get a lease, if we can put it in the system and make sure that that lease is being tracked and we know what those dates are, that's probably the best case scenario. And then we would be then reaching back out to them. If they want to do a ground up project, it's a different timeline than if you want to do a lease renewal, if you want to stay in that space forever. And so even understanding some of what they want to be doing with their real estate is important. But biggest thing is just understanding what those dates are within the lease and having somebody track those. And so we've got a great system. We've got a great ability to do that. One other thing I want to hit on too is I don't think a lot of people understand what a broker, like why would I need a broker, especially with the renewal? I've got a relationship with my landlord.
Mm.
I think most of the time landlords do a great job of saying, hey, I'm for you. I want you to be successful and whatever. But at the end of the day, the landlord is capitalizing off of their income. And so there are two parties involved in this transaction, and the landlord sometimes does a good job of saying, I want to make sure that you're paying a fair market rate. For instance, if we go back to that one I was telling you about, she's paying $30 a foot. If the landlord is smart, he's going to say, hey, I'm going to give you a big break. I'm going to do it at $29 a square foot. And so they pull that rate down, and that's $2,500 a year. And the doctor goes, that's awesome. But then what they don't realize is that they're actually marketing the space next door for 20. And so some landlords might, if they're giving you a break, sometimes landlords will do that to say, hey, I'm for you. But they don't understand that there are two sides of the transaction. You have a landlord friendly deal, which there are some, but not many. You have a tenant friendly deal, which there are very few of, if any. And you're going to be somewhere in between. So you might be over here with the landlord friendly deal. And if you can move it from here closer to the middle, that could be a $90,000 difference. And so where you end up in that spectrum is important. And so having a broker look it over, make sure that you are considering options. Even when doctors say, hey, I want to renew this lease, we're going to take them to the market and show them what else is out there so they can know what their what fair market actually is. And then when we come back to the landlord, we're not saying, hey, will you give us $1 a square foot off? We're saying, hey, we've got 3 other landlords who are willing to give us X, and we like the center, but we need you to we need you to give us this deal if we're going to stay here. And
Right.
so it's a very different posture. It's a very different approach to the landlord, and you're kind of taking back control of that deal to make sure that they are that you're getting a fair deal and optimizing that expense. So that's one area that a lot of doctors don't really understand. One other is when a doctor goes, let's say they want to go into a Publix. We see a lot of dentists go into Publix, and they call the name in that window. And that person on the other end of the line, a lot of times they don't understand what parties are involved in that transaction. And so they call that number, and the person says, yeah, I want to help you get into the space. And in the doctor's mind, they're thinking, okay, I have an agent or I have somebody helping me. But again, that person has a fiduciary. Before they can put their name in that window, they have to get an agreement with the landlord to say, I am protecting you in this transaction. So the landlord to that broker is a client. The dentist is a customer, and there is a distinction there. They have a legal responsibility to one party and not the other. So they have to get this party the best possible deal. And so a lot of doctors in Alabama, when I was taking the broker testing, they hit this very hard to say the number one issue that comes before the real estate commission is a non-disclosure issue, meaning that agent who worked at Publix did not disclose to the doctor that they were actually representing the other party and that the doctor is not a client of theirs. And so the 75% of the cases that come in front of the Alabama Real Estate Commission, and it's similar in other states as well, are doctors or really consumers saying, I did not know that you were opposed to me in this transaction. So some doctors think, yeah, I've got an agent, they're helping me, but that's not the same thing. You have to have somebody, whether us or somebody else, you need to have a commercial agent helping you with that transaction. And the biggest thing is, which most doctors don't understand either, that's a free service. If that broker gets compensated in the transaction, they're going to be splitting that commission with the other agent. So some doctors think, I'm saving money, we'll just knock 3% off the deal and we'll call it a day. The landlord will take that deal immediately because 3% is very little in terms of concessions within a commercial real estate transaction. And so they'll say, yeah, we'll knock 3% off because you didn't bring an agent. And then they're actually going to turn around and pay their broker 5 or 6% anyways, because they have an agreement already on the table saying, I'm going to pay this commission, whether you split it with somebody else or not. This is the commission that's set aside. And so that's a common misconception, is doctors think I'm actually saving money by not having an agent. That's not true. You should have somebody representing you, and they shouldn't be. Some agents actually do charge fees to represent doctors. You should not have to pay your agent. They should be compensated just like in residential real estate. Buyers don't pay the fees, the sellers, or in commercial real estate as well, the landlords pay those fees. And so you should never have to pay to have somebody representing you within the transaction. So those are a couple of the common misconceptions where doctors don't really understand what's at stake or who's involved, who represents who. They need to be making sure that they have somebody that is only looking after their interests. And they should be, if they don't get a disclosure from an agent saying what their relationship is, that's actually illegal in most states. The agent should be notifying them. But we find oftentimes doctors, we've worked with groups who have 20 locations, and they say, yeah, nobody's ever told me that. We've transacted on 15 deals and nobody's ever said, I actually work against you in the transaction, or disclosed what their relationships were to each party. And so a lot of times we see agents not, and I mean, think about it. If you're that agent, why would you tell them? Because now they're going to say, well, I want an agent too then, and they're going to go find their own. And so a lot of times that happens within real estate, and it's costs consumers tens to even hundreds of thousands of dollars because they don't understand what's at stake. And so it's an area where if you're in a lease, have somebody look it over. Get that lease in somebody's hands, a professional's hands, who can help track those dates and then reach back out to you at the correct time. So it's not a hey, I'm 12 months out now, I should be contacting somebody. Get that lease in somebody's hands so that they can be tracking those dates and then reaching back out to you at the correct time.
Gotcha. In your opinion, okay, I'll have a little kind of a FAQ or back and forth here. Yeah. In your opinion, what is the appropriate line item percentage on a practice's P&L for their lease or mortgage?
Sure. So I like to keep opinions out of it. The ADA says you should be anywhere between 6 and 9%. I don't know why they have a bottom number there. If you can get it at 3, that's great. Yeah. But 6 and 9% is what the ADA says that you should be spending on real estate.
Okay.
And it's going to change. If you do a startup, you're going to probably be 15% for the first year, and it's going to continue to lower. But so not putting as much emphasis on what that number actually is, but knowing what within the grand scheme of things, looking everything overall, where is my real estate expense? It should probably be somewhere between that 6 to 9%.
Right. Because when I just evaluated a practice for a client of mine who's getting ready is going to be his second location. And obviously P&Ls are one of the things that I pull, and I go to the P&L, I look, and I'm looking at what percentage is staff salaries, what percentage they spend on marketing, lab, dental supplies, et cetera. And lease is one of them I always look at. And what I typically recommend is trying to get that lease or mortgage payment in the 4 to 6% range. Because what we're trying to drive to the bottom line is 40%. We want the owner doctor, we want a 40% margin so the owner doctor can pay himself or herself 30 to 35% of the collections on their own production. So paying themselves as a dentist in their own business, and then paying themselves as the CEO or the manager, and paying themselves a distribution as the owner. So they should be getting paid 3 to 4 ways from that business. And if they own the real estate, then their practice
there's another avenue.
Payments for the real estate. So they should be getting paid 3 to 4 ways from their business. And when I look at the P&L, if they're not between that 4 to 6% range, okay, the number one thing that comes to mind, and it's going to be twofold. There's one of two reasons why they are not between 4 and 6%. And option A would be they've got poor terms. They don't have good terms on the real estate. They're paying too much per square foot, and that's your area of expertise. So I would immediately call Mike and say, Mike, can you take a look at this and tell me what you think? Right. And then option B. So let's say you take a look at it and you say, oh man, they're getting hosed on this thing. We need to fix this. And so, if we can fix it, we fix it. If we got some period of time, we've got to wait until we get it fixed.
Yep.
And we that period of time. And then we start taking advantage of option number 2. And then option number 2 is if they're not in that 4 to 6% range, there's a lot of inefficiencies in that business. They're not as productive as they should be based on the physical resource that they're investing in.
Yep.
They've got 12 operatories. They're only utilizing 4.
Yeah.
And then they're going to be way lopsided. So what options, and this may be a whole different one of these calls I need to do, but I would say the fastest ways, if that is the case, the fastest ways to move into those, extra operatories or fully utilize that time. If you've got 4 operatories and you're using all 4, then maybe what that looks like is you go to, a 9 or a 12-hour day instead of an 8-hour day. You go 5 or 6 days a week rather than 4 days a week. And then we want to look at your hygiene schedule, hygiene capacity, make sure logistically and fundamentally all the pieces line up, right?
Right.
And then some options to grow into the additional operatories that are there would be like bring in specialists.
Yep.
Rather than referring out all your implants, bring in a periodontist or an oral surgeon, place your implants or do your third molar. It might be merger and acquisition. Find a practice that's 500 yards down the road
Buy
here.
Buy
the charts and merge that practice merge those patients into your practice, maybe retain the selling doctor. Now you've got a 2-doctor practice. Right? You acquire 2 rooms of hygiene. I think it's very, very important to stay on top of your hygiene department, because I can't tell you the number of times I run into this, and I ran into this with this practice I looked at last weekend. There was 7 openings in the hygiene schedule over the next 6 months. He had 2 hygiene.
Wow.
He's got 4 operatories, 2 restorative, 2 hygiene. And there were 7 openings in the hygiene schedule over the next 6 months. He's got enough hygiene in that practice to have 4 hygienists.
Yeah.
But he doesn't
He
doesn't have the operatories for it.
Right.
So now my client's potentially going to buy this practice on day 1. We're going to be adding we're either going to add hours or days, but we're going to start capitalizing on that additional hygiene.
Right.
So it's very important to know what that looks like. Hygiene is the backbone of a general dentistry practice. And if you don't have capacity to get new patients in, to get reactivated dormant patients in, that's going to deteriorate your revenue and your profitability, and it's going to inflate your line item expenses.
Yep.
So a lot of people will beat up their shine rep. I'm paying too much for cotton balls.
Exactly.
Maybe you're not paying too much for cotton balls. Maybe you're just really inefficient with your schedule.
Yep.
Maybe you're not, paying your team too much, or you've got too many team members. Maybe we're just not productive enough with the human capital that we're investing in,
right?
The resources that we're investing in. So I think once you fix the fundamental errors in that business plan, then the reality begins to come to the surface, and you can see what that picture really looks like.
Right.
Then if you're a little out of whack, or things are a little not where they're supposed to be, then make some potential business decisions to move pieces of the equation so they fit, and you're able to drive the profitability that you need to be able to drive as a practicing dentist. So that's one of the reasons I've got folks like you in the equation, because you show me a lease and I can look at it, and I'll know enough to get myself confused. And then
I don't know if you can hear, but I think my puppy is trying to love on my daughter, and she's freaking out.
Oh yeah,
exactly. Back to that point. But to that point, I think sometimes productive practices or high producing practices can cover up areas. So that 4 to 6% number, just because you're within that, doesn't mean that there's not room to bring it down. So you might be in an area where you're still way overpaying in rent, but since you're producing so much, it kind of covers up an issue. Yeah. And so having, I wouldn't even necessarily just consider what is my percentage, but you've got to know, is this a fair market deal? I'll give you one example too. Richard's on this call. Actually, we had one client. It was a medical office, massive space, 30,000 square feet. It was just a GP. They had 12 doctors in Coleman, Alabama, and they were paying, they had terms in front of them from the landlord saying, here's your rate. And this is what a lot of doctors do. They said, well, that seems high. I'm going to go ask other tenants. And they went and asked the other tenants in that office, what are you paying? And all of them said 1850. And they were like, okay, I guess that's fair market. And then Richard said, hey, do you mind if I try? Let me see if I can make this thing work. And we got it down. We got the rate down, $3 a square foot. We got some other things that were hidden within the lease. The base year, we reset that base year, which was about a $600,000 difference. We got 5 months of free rent and $500,000 to build out the space. It was a $3.7 million difference from where they started to where we were able to negotiate.
Wow.
And again, this is 30,000 square feet, but if you take that down to a 3,000 square foot dental office, that's still $250,000 difference.
Sure.
Where they otherwise wouldn't have been able to capitalize on that money. And again, their motive for saying this is a good deal is asking other tenants.
Right.
Well, just because they're paying a bad rate, does that mean you should too? And so a lot of times issues can be covered up by high producing practices. And so even those practices, even if it's at 3% of their number, it's still worth looking at. Because a lot of times when somebody buys a practice, that's another area where there's a big opportunity. The bank is looking at certain numbers. Does this work? Does it cash flow well? We did one in Huntsville where it cash flowed. The bank said, we're good to go. The CPA said, hey, this seems a little high still. Let's go look. And we saved that doctor $1,800 a month in rent because the selling doctor was that inflated on the real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, again, an immediate, even though the bank was going to do it, we still were able to save them that $1,800 a month.
Yeah. It's kind of like they say money fixes a lot of problems.
Exactly.
But it can also create problems. So if let's say you're doing endo, ortho, oral surgery, strong perio percentage, crown and bridge, technology driven, all that stuff. And, your doctor's doing $4 to every $1 hygiene.
Yep.
That's going to be a high end, comprehensive practice. You're going to be much more productive per square foot.
Right.
Than what a lot of other practices are. And it may look as though your lease is a lower percentage. And I tell you, it needs to be between 4 and 6 and you're at 3.5. You're like, oh, I'm good. I'm not going to worry about that. But 3.5 may still be bad based on where you're located.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So it's just kind of a model. It's a template to look at for consideration. But just because 3.5% is a great place to be doesn't mean it can't be better.
Right.
Just because, you're enrolling 61% of the patients that you present treatment to doesn't mean you can't get to 70.
Right.
I think the top 10% in the country are like between 61 and 64%. Just because you're 64 doesn't mean you can't get to 70.
Right. Yep.
And then I think that the opposite of that equation is true. When you don't have a lot of money, it starts to a lot of the problems, quickly, navigate to the surface. You're kind of like,
exactly.
Oh man, that rent payment is really uncomfortable now. It used to not be an issue. So let's look at that. So bottom line is all of these things, you need to be looking at your business from a comprehensive perspective. And not just that, you need other perspectives as well. So you need different professionals. You need your accountant, you need your attorney, your coach, your real estate broker. You need different people that are assessing and analyzing this information. Say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Because there's so much. It's true in my business. It's true in your business, probably, certainly for a lot of our doctors around the country. There's so much that we still don't know. We don't know.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know who said this, but they said that knowledge is like an island. What you know is the inland, and what you don't know is the shoreline. Well, the more you learn, the bigger the island gets, but the bigger the shoreline gets too.
Yep.
So the more you learn, the more ignorant you become.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's I think it's a great, I use this phrase a lot, man, and it's as iron sharpens iron. And I think that's incredible. I think that is incredibly important. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who understand your philosophy and your vision and where you want to go.
Yep.
And people that are going to encourage you and support you to get there.
100%.
They happen to provide services that benefit you along the way. Man, that's a win-win. So, cool.
Yes,
man.
sir.
I'd like to do another one of these. We hit some points in there that I want to expand upon. Specifically, if what can we do on the real estate side if we're not in that range that we want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
What are some options that we have on the real estate side, and then what can we do from a practice management side?
Yep.
I think that'd be an interesting thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love to do it, man. You let me know when. I appreciate you having us.
I surely will. I appreciate you being on, man. And I know a lot of folks have other priorities than listening to us all morning, so we're going to let them get back to today. This is obviously broadcasted on Facebook Live. It's going to be on our page. You guys will probably share it. It's on my business pages and personal page, so it'll be available there. And then, great. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And Mike, I certainly enjoyed it. It's good talking to you, man.
You too. Have a good one.
Yes, sir. You did the same.
Bye.